This case study is about the Eyjafjallajokull volcano that erupted in Iceland in 2010. Now, on this map, you can see that Iceland lies on the mid-Atlantic ridge, which is a constructive plate margin separating the Eurasian plate over this side and the North American plate on that side. As the plates move apart, magma rises to the surface to form several active volcanoes located in a belt running roughly southwest to northeast through the centre of Iceland, as you can see here, marked by this colour here. There's the ridge of volcanoes. Now, the Eyjafjallajokull volcano is 1,666 metres high. It's located beneath an ice cap in southern Iceland, which is 125 kilometres southeast of the capital Reykjavik. In March 2010, magma broke through the crust beneath the glacier. This was the start of 2 months of dramatic and powerful eruptions that would have an impact on people not only in Iceland, but across the globe. The eruptions in March were mostly lava eruptions. Whilst they were spectacular and fiery, they didn't represent much threat to the local communities. However, on the 14th of April, a new phase began, which was much more explosive. Over a period of several days in mid-April, violent eruptions belched huge quantities of ash into the atmosphere, as can be seen on the photograph. So what were the local impacts and responses? The heavier particles of ash, such as black gritty sand, fell to the ground close to the volcano, forcing hundreds of people to be evacuated. This is an example of an immediate response, something that would happen straight away. As day turned to night, rescuers wore face masks to prevent them choking on the dense cloud of ash. These ash falls, which coated agricultural land with a thick layer of ash, were the main primary effects of the eruption. As you can see on the photograph here, the farmland here would have been covered by all the ash coming from the volcano. One of the most damaging secondary effects of the eruption was flooding. Now, primary effects are those effects that happen straight away as a result of the eruption. The secondary effects are the after effects that occur as an indirect effect of the eruption on a longer time scale. So as I say, the secondary effect was flooding. As the eruption occurred beneath a glacier, a huge amount of meltwater was produced. Vast torrents of water flowed out from under the ice. Sections of the embankment that supported the main highway in southern Iceland were deliberately breached by the authorities to allow the floodwaters to pass through to the sea. This action successfully prevented expensive bridges being destroyed. After the eruption, bulldozers were quickly able to rebuild the embankments, and within a few weeks the highway was reconstructed. However, it wasn't just at a local level that the impact of this volcano had. It became an international event in mid-April 2010 as the cloud of fine ash spread southeastwards towards the rest of Europe. As you can see on the map, the dashed line is the extent of the ash cloud at 20 to 30,000 foot on the 15th of April. So around here, this is how far it had gone on the 15th of April. By the 16th of April, got this peachy type of colour. Look how far that ash had actually extended. Now, this caused concern about the possible harmful effects of ash on aeroplane jet engines. Large sections of European airspace ended up being closed down, so there were no flights. Passenger and freight traffic throughout much of Europe also ground to a halt. The knock-on effects were extensive and were felt across the world. Business people and tourists were stranded. They were unable to travel into or out of Western Europe. Industrial production was affected as raw materials could not be flown in and products could not be exported by air. As far away as Kenya, farm workers lost their jobs or suffered pay cuts as fresh produce such as flowers and beans perished, unable to be flown to European supermarkets. The airline companies and airport operators lost huge amounts of money. Some people felt that the closures were an overreaction and that airplanes could fly safely through low concentrations of ash. However, a scientific review conducted after the eruption concluded that under the circumstances, it had been the right decision to close the airspace. Further research will be carried out as a long-term response to find better ways of monitoring ash concentrations and improving forecast models. This, however, wasn't all bad news. There were some positive impacts of the volcanic activity. This whole area has become a new Icelandic tourist attraction with its own visitor centre. The Icelandic Tourist Board now encourages people to visit the land of ice and fire, bringing benefits to local people and industries. Lava and ash are rich in nutrients, making the soils in the volcanic areas very fertile and good for agricultural use. The rock themselves can be used for building. The valuable source of geothermal energy just below the surface of the Earth is usually relatively easy to access. This can be used to produce electricity and provide hot water for industrial processes, heating swimming pools, and even melting snow on pavements. Small quantities of valuable minerals such as gold, copper, silver, lead, and zinc are often found in volcanic regions, and deposits of sulfur can be mined from volcanic craters and used to bleach sugar and make matches and fertilizer. This table sums up the impact that the eruption had at a local, a national, and an international scale. It's really important that we can talk about those different scales. So on a local level, as it talks about, lots of people were evacuated, 800 people in total. Homes and roads were damaged, so all things like electricity and water were disrupted. Local flood defences had to be reconstructed, as we talked earlier, due to knocking them down to allow the flood to reach the seawater. Crops were damaged. Local water supplies were contaminated with fluoride, so they wouldn't be able to drink the water. At a national level, so for the rest of Iceland, tourism was affected. So the number of tourists who were coming in and out was stopped. This therefore affected the Icelandic economy and of course people's jobs and incomes. The road transport was disrupted as roads were washed away by floods. Again, agricultural production was affected due to the layer of ash that had kind of covered those crops. They had to rebuild the roads that they'd either been damaged or knocked down, and this of course is an expensive business. At an international level, 100,000 flights were cancelled. This was 48% of the total air traffic. This meant the knock-on effect was that millions and millions of passengers were affected, and they lost about £80 million in total to the Airport Operators Association. Industries were affected, so Honda announced a partial halt to production. Fresh food couldn't be imported, therefore supermarkets and producers across the world were affected negatively in a financial sense. In sport, a number of international events had to be were affected by the flight ban, including the Japanese Motorcycle Grand Prix, the French Rugby League teams competing in the Challenge Cup, and the Boston Marathon on the 19th of April, as people were unable to fly to those events.